What's happening, you guys? Vanity V here. Carlos King, my BFF. I'm saying that because a lot of y'all think that I don't like Carlos. Carlos does get on my nerves, but I admire him. I respect him. And I think, I'll be honest, he is a great interviewer and host. You know, he does great with like the reunions. And he has done the damn near impossible. And he's got Nene to sit down for like 2 hours so that she could talk to us about all the things that are just going on in her life, her opinion on the housewives, her relationship, the stuff that's happened with Bryson, all of the stuff in a 2-part, interview. I was going to actually stay away from this initially, you guys, but I think Carlos did a great job and I really enjoyed the interview. So let's talk about part 1. I want to see what y'all think. Let's get into part 1. Let's talk about it, you guys. Right off the bat, I just want to say Nene looks absolutely amazing, okay? She's in her 50s, but she looks beautiful. Initially, I'll be honest, you guys, I didn't know how I felt about Nene. She's gotten a lot of surgery, and I'm not a fan of black people touching their face. I'm not a fan. I have big features, big nose, big lips. I love it. I think that's a part of what makes black people beautiful and what makes us unique. So I've never really been a big fan of like touching your face, but Nene, I guess everything has kind of come together and she looks beautiful. She's aging gracefully. She always dresses appropriately. Her makeup was flawless. Her outfit, her hair, everything. I loved her outfit, her shoes, her jewelry. So I want to say off top, Nene looked great. So A+ across the board on just her appearance. She came and she slayed and she looked absolutely beautiful. So that's the first point. That's great. So you guys know, Carlos asked her, do you watch the show? What do you think about the show? Nene says she doesn't watch the show anymore, you guys. Do y'all believe her? She says she watches the clips, but I don't know if I believe that. And I'm going to tell you why. So I can understand you being on the show. Maybe it's sensitive. I think it's probably sensitive for Nene. But I feel like throughout the duration of this interview that Nene knew too much. Like, I feel like she knew too much about the characters, about some of the new girls. She mentioned in part 2, which we'll talk about later, Manetta and Sonia and all of them. Like, how you know so much? I feel like you knew more than just the clips would give. So she said she doesn't watch the show anymore. What do y'all think? I don't know if I believe that. I thought that was an interesting thing to say. But if she doesn't, I could understand why. But I do think that Nene watches the show. It was nice to hear her talk about like the beginning of the show, season 1. She said that in the first 2 or 3 weeks, she wasn't being herself. I didn't notice that. And she said that she had to talk with herself after the first couple weeks of filming the first season. And that after she did that, she's like, okay, I'm going to be Nene. Like, I'm going to give them the real, the raw, the uncut of who I am. And so I don't know if I noticed. I have to go back. I haven't seen season 1 in so long. But she definitely said that in the beginning she had a hard time with being herself. And I love how candid Nene was being in both parts of this interview. But she said, like, look, I'm going to give them, they're going to either love me or hate me. I'm going to give them all of me. And so she did that. And I actually really appreciate that. Although I do think Nene's not always honest, I do think she keeps it pretty real most of the time outside of some of her delusions. But I thought that was super. Carlos was able to really get her to be vulnerable, you guys. So it was nice to just definitely see that part of her and to know that, in the beginning she kind of struggled with being herself. But then she was able to, come out of her shell and be the Nene that we know. And I think and that's what I actually really love about Carlos. I'm going to give him his credit and his flowers. That he's very charismatic. He has that like around way of making you be comfortable. And I've noticed that when he does interviews with everyone, that people feel very comfortable talking to him. And that he's able to ask really hard questions because he asked her all the questions that we want to know without making you offended in the moment. I feel like sometimes when he does his commentary without guests, that's a different story. But I feel like when he's in the company of his guests, he's really good at making them feel comfortable. And I definitely noticed that in this interview. Carlos asked her all the questions about the girls, and he went right. She kind of started talking about Kenya, and he was like, okay, well, hold on, we're gonna get into that. But he asked her about Sheree, and the funny part is, remember the party that Sheree had first season at her house, and it was clear, we all knew that Sheree left Nene off the list. And so Nene was like, yeah, I know. And so I didn't hear this interview, but Carlos was like, yeah, but Sheree finally admitted that she left you off the list. And so Nene was like, yeah, finally. But that was probably, Nene has to throw shade in there. She was like, that was probably the best thing that Sheree ever did, because Carlos and Nene said that at that moment when Sheree left Nene off the list at her party, that kind of catapulted the series. And that's when they all knew, like, okay, this show was going to be a hit. So I think it's hilarious that this many years later, Sheree finally admitted that she was shady in that moment. So then, because, Nene has her way of being shady, Carlos asked, like, so do you like Sheree? And so she was like, well, I don't dislike Sheree, which I think that that's probably true. But she was like, we just don't have that connection. You know what I mean? Like, we were really, really cool before the show. Like, me and my husband hung out with her and Bob. And then once the camera started rolling, Sheree got very brand new. And I actually do think that's true, because I noticed that first season. I do vividly remember Sheree being funny style towards Nene, and we didn't quite know. I think Nene probably was talking, mess about her. And maybe, I think I remember like Kim Zolciak kind of being the go-between, being the mole and being shady and going back. But, Nene said, like, I don't really understand the trajectory of how our relationship had a decline. And I did notice that season 1. So she addressed that. So that's really no surprise at all as far as her and Sheree. They're not close. I think that Nene and Sheree are good at being cordial with people, even though they're not feeling them. So that's probably the place that they're at. Carlos also, got Nene to talk about the fact that Nene said she felt like an underdog season 1. And I can imagine that's probably true. Nene, she's loud, she's boisterous, she's tall. So she probably didn't know how the consumers of the show, or the people who were watching the show, were going to take her. And then she was like, I ended up being the star of the show. And it's true. Like, Nene was the star of the show. I think that Kim also, she had star power. I've never really seen it for Kim, but that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, Nene definitely said, like, I felt like the underdog of the show. So, it changed, and I became the star, right? One of my favorite parts of the interview of part 1 was Carlos asked Nene, which I appreciated this. He said, do you feel like you got an ego after season 1? Nene's like, no, I don't. Nene. Now, Nene, you have an ego. And it's okay. Like, you know what I need people to do? I need people to own the things and the qualities that make them them. You have an ego, boo. Like, Nene, we're not going to do this. You have said, and it's fine. I think having an ego isn't always bad, because I do feel like it's justified. You are absolutely the star. You're the breakout star. You're absolutely hilarious. We absolutely love you. And that's the main takeaway from this interview, is how much we miss her on TV. But Nene, you have an ego. You had one. You talked about how you were so amazing and so much better than these women. That is an ego. You have it. You have an ego. Like I said, and again, is the ego warranted? Yes. Nene is the shit. She still is, and like I said, this interview made me realize how much I really miss her on TV. But you have an ego. We're going to move past that. So they talked about what the girls, like, their salaries. And I cannot believe that the season 1 that they made only $10,000. $10,000? That ain't no money. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that we know OC is the original. I believe New York was the second season, and then shortly after New York, Atlanta was the third, the third franchise. You already knew you had something special with the other 2 franchises. So $10,000, I can't believe that they only gave them $10,000 that first season. That's crazy. Yeah, that's nuts. So they made $10,000 the first season, and then Nene says that the second season they made $50,000, which is obviously better than 10. 50 still isn't any. I think for what they do, $50,000 is not okay. And Atlanta was the hottest show at that time. Like after season 1, we were all in and sold and invested. And then they come back for season 2 and she only made $50,000. So then she says like around season 3 that all the girls got together and they got an attorney, an entertainment attorney, and then she said they made either 100,000 to 150 that third season. And then when season 4 rolled around, that's when they started making like real money. So as you can see, this reality show stuff, it don't pay nothing for real. Like you have to really be dope and established and really good to make money. So people that want to go into that, beware. So Carlo asked Nene about, the first time that her and Cynthia met. Obviously, Cynthia and Nene's relationship is something that we all care about if you care about the Real Housewives of Atlanta, because we know that they were really close. And it was sad, and we saw like the demise of their relationship. And so he asked her about when they first met, and Nene was saying that like of course, Nene has to be shady. So she was saying like, well, I didn't know her. And Carlos was like, well, she was on the Cosby Show. She's a model. She's like, I didn't see that episode. And so, I guess they first time they filmed at Papado, and she said they clicked right away. And I think Cynthia said the same thing. Like, we definitely clicked. Like, we liked each other. Nene was saying she was starstruck, which I get it. I mean, you want to be on this show, and you're having lunch with the biggest star of the show. So I could understand being starstruck in that moment. So Nene and Cynthia clicked, and then Carlos asked Nene about Peter, and she was like, well, I wasn't feeling Peter. Which Peter's a lot. Like, I could get it. Like, Peter is very in your face. He's going to tell you how he feels. He talks probably too damn much. And she was like, yeah, like, I didn't understand the relationship. Peter is this way. Cynthia was that way. So I wasn't really feeling Peter at first. She also says, which I believe that she says Cynthia is two totally different people on and off camera. The Cynthia we see, she's poised and pulled up. And I could tell Cynthia is very careful with how she carries herself, which I love. But Cynthia was like, she's a little about it outside of the show. Like, y'all think she's this way and she's not a pushover. So she emphasized that. We know that Cynthia can read. So she was just saying, like, it's interesting because the Cynthia that she knows is a different person off camera. They talk about Phaedra, okay? She said she didn't like Phaedra at first, which was evident and very clear. I think it was like they're both from Athens, Georgia. And I think that Nene felt, Phaedra, who is she? I don't want you coming here encroaching on my turf. You're from Athens, like, you're an attorney. Almost, she said, like, I felt initially like Phaedra didn't belong. I see that because it took me a while to warm up to Phaedra too. I absolutely love Phaedra for TV. I don't love what she did to Candy, but I mean, we've all moved past that. But I had to warm up to Phaedra too. So she was just like, who is this chick? Why is she here? We're from Athens. Like, we worked hard to develop this show. Get her out of here. So that was, she talked about, that was her initial feeling about Phaedra, when she first. I also thought it was interesting, Nene touched on the fact that, like, the first cast, like the original cast, that everybody, really talked about their real life. They talked about their marriages, their relationships. We know Kim was with Big Papa. They were really together. They talked about that. They really gave us an insight to, like, their real lives. And she said that the moment that she felt that the show changed was, number one, when Kenya came, because I love Kenya. Kenya is one of my faves. Her relationship with Walter, that wasn't a real relationship. They were never going to get married. But she talked about how she felt like not only Kenya, like, that's kind of what changed the franchise somewhat, was some of these women coming on, not necessarily with fake storylines, but not giving us the real. So she touched on that. She touched on that definitely. and she said she felt that with Phaedra as well. And what she meant by that, and this is really why I think that first season, Phaedra came on season 3. I don't think I like Phaedra because that whole mess with like her not knowing how far along she was. Let me tell you something. I have a daughter. And what I knew was how far along. I don't care what nobody says. You know how far along you are. You know it. You know that the day that the weeks change, because you do it by weeks. You know that. And so I was just like, Phaedra, you're an attorney. You're very intelligent. Like, why are you playing in our face? And so she said, like, I didn't like that. I felt that Phaedra kind of kicked it off season 3 with being dishonest about how far along she was. And then when Kenya came on season 5, Kenya took it to a whole nother level with the fake relationship. So she spoke on how she thought that went. I also love how she was candid when Carlos asked her, like, do you have any regrets with anything that you filmed or with putting your kids on TV? And she said, yeah, she was honest about that. And I can understand that. She said, look, I chose this. My children didn't choose to be on the show. So I know it definitely affected them. She talked about, a moment where she disciplined Bryson. I don't remember that. I got to go back and look because I don't remember her disciplining Bryson on TV. But she said that really hurt him. And that's probably her biggest regret. But like I said, I don't remember that. I got to go look that up. But yeah, like she said, she knows that maybe some of the issues that they have today, come from her putting them on Front Street for us to judge their lives too. And then, she also talked about, which I'm so glad she did, Bryson and his struggles with his drug addiction. She went into that and talked about that. I don't know. Maybe I've been living under a rock, but I wasn't aware that Bryson has been struggling with drug addiction. Even when he recently got in trouble and lied and said his name was Brent, which that's shady as hell, but we're not going to get into that. I didn't know that he had been I know that he's been in trouble. I think he maybe boosted from a store or got caught stealing, but I didn't realize that he had struggles with drugs and was in and out of rehab, and so that was endearing that she shared that with us. And she talked about John. Remember the guy, I don't know what his ethnicity is, but when she was going through the divorce with Greg, John, she was dating him. She said she recently talked to John, and John offered to put Bryson into rehab. And she said that Lamar Odom offered as well. So it's good to see that she has a support system to help her and her son through this. Okay, so Carlos also, talked about Greg, God rest his soul, and kind of asked her, like, how do you feel like Greg felt, with you becoming a star and making your own money? Because she talked about she was a housewife before the show. Like, she didn't work. She literally was a housewife, and she had to ask Greg for everything. And she was candid, and she said, I feel like I maybe did emasculate him. Maybe not on purpose, but the fact that I went from having to ask him for everything, him making all the money, to now I'm making more money than you, and he's very traditional. She said he probably had a hard time with that. So she said that, inadvertently, I probably did emasculate him. And so I thought that was dope that she admitted that, in that moment, because I think that a lot of women struggle with that, women that are powerful and making money. So it was good to see her admit that. And she got into her divorce with Greg, and she talked about how hard that was for her, and that we may not have noticed that. I remember that when she was on the show and she was divorcing Greg, I remember she was mean. Y'all remember that? Like, I feel like, and I've never been through a divorce, so I'm not sure. I'm sure that is probably one of the most challenging and devastating things that you can go through in your life. But I remember her being mean, and I feel like she was meaner to Greg than necessary. But she talked about how difficult it was. And then, she talked about how in that time when she dated John, she said he spoiled her, bought her all of the things, but that she never connected with him. So it seems like Nene, and she even said it, she didn't want to divorce Greg, but you know how it is, sometimes men make you have to prove a point, and that's what happened. But she was hurting really badly during that time. So Yoni, Let's talk about that. Of course, Carlos asked her about Yoni. I'm gonna just tell y'all right now, out the gate, off top, when she first started dating him, I was like, he's a cloud chaser. Like, I knew it. I could spot a cloud chaser. You could tell by his walk, his aura, his energy, his swag. Like, he was a cloud chaser. You could tell he loves the limelight. And Nene was like, that was part of the problem. Like, we both can't be stars. Like, I don't want to date someone that I'm like competing with. And so she talked about that, but what she did say, she said, look, I did not meet him prior to Greg passing away. I met him after. She said that, and Peter also said this, Peter did not hook them up, but, she just talked about how she met him. And she talked about, which was nice, that he actually helped her during her grieving. So he did help her in a way. When you lose a loved one, you never know how that's going to affect you. You don't know how you're going to handle that. Grieving is, not linear. And so I say in the moment, it looked crazy because it's like, damn, he just died and you're already booed up with this guy. But if he served his purpose to help her through the hardest time of her life, I say great. We know Greg was adamant about wanting her to be happy. He wanted her to find love. He didn't want her to be unhappy. So I think that, Greg would give a round of applause to Yoni in that moment to know that, that he was there for her. So she talked about that, but she also said they're not together. She said, there's things about me that he doesn't love and there's things about him that I don't love. She didn't go into detail, but I can imagine it's probably the fact that he wants to be a star. That's probably why she kicked him to the curb. So yeah, her and Yoni, I never thought that was gonna last. But she also said that she doesn't ever think she'll be in love like she was with Greg. She was saying Greg is one of a kind. He's a class act, and the way that he loved her, and I do believe that. I don't believe that, and that's why people always think like the grass is greener, and it's not. When you find someone special with that you have chemistry and a connection with, and even if things get stale from time to time, you need to water that and allow that to grow, because searching the fish in the sea is pee in the pool. Okay. As long as that person is respecting you and loving you, if it's special, you need to hold on to it. And so she was just saying, like, I don't think that I'm going to find that again, because the way that he loved me, you only get loves like that once, maybe twice in a lifetime. But she's older. She's looking for different things now. So I thought that was interesting, too, for her to tell. Nene flat out said she and Candy fought tooth and nail for Porsha to come back. Because I remember that season, and I remember wondering, I don't know if she's going to come back. Like, because it's like, I like Porsha, but you just felt it in the air. You felt it exuding from her that she was holding back. And I was like, look, if we're not going to get like the real, and she's going to be like doing what her husband says about everything, she doesn't need to be on this show. So Nene said, like, look, I love Porsha, and I'm not trying to shade her, but me, along with Candy, we fought for her to come back. I'm not surprised by that. Nene and Candy have always been the fan favorites. And so I'm not surprised to hear that they were fighting for Porsha, which actually makes me a little upset with Porsha with how she did Candy. It's like, girl, she went to bat for you. But anyway, yes, so we see that Nene confirmed that Porsha was not about to come back after season 1. But obviously, thank God that Porsha did come back, because she ended up being a phenomenal addition to the show. She's a fun time girl. She's hilarious. She's lighthearted. She's like beautiful, fabulous. She dresses her ass off. So Porsha was great. Then y'all, Nene dropped a bomb. She dropped a bomb about Cynthia. So this is where I'm kind of side-eyeing Nene. I don't know. She alluded, not even alluded, she said that like Cynthia is the part of the reason why she's not on the show. That Cynthia was secretly like going to production and trying to get her off the show, and that she has proof and that she knows that. I don't know if I believe that, you guys. I actually think it was the opposite. I think Nene was the one who was verbally in public talking about how Cynthia should be off. So I didn't like that. because I just don't believe that. Obviously, I don't know these women, any of them, but I think that we all have a pretty good judge of character of each of them as we've gotten to know them over almost 10 years. Nene over 10 years, Cynthia about 10 years. I don't believe that. I don't think that Cynthia tried to stop Nene from coming on the show. I would like to see those receipts because Candy and Cynthia are probably the most honest people that have ever touched the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Lord, it's too many people. Cynthia's character, I don't believe it. And even you could tell Carlos was like, I don't believe that, y'all. That part of the interview was kind of problematic to me. I flat out don't believe it. I don't know what else to say about that. So yeah, and I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, Cynthia made a statement about it. I have not gone to look, so I probably will go. But yeah, I just do not believe that Cynthia did that. So I don't know. I'm curious. What do you guys think? Drop in my comments and let me know how you feel about that. So that just, that kind of sums up the part 1. I definitely am going to give you guys some commentary on part 2 because she gets in depth on her relationship with Wendy Williams in part 2, in addition to talking about, her lawsuit with Bravo, which is ongoing. I wish that they could work it out because I want Nene back on the show. I want her on TV. I love her. She's hilarious. And this Bravo, Carlos, you did a good job. You did a great job with this interview, and I enjoyed you and Nene. So I will come back and talk about part 2, you guys. You guys have a great Wednesday.